Wall Street contributor Sam Palmisano ran IBM, and he says it's understandable that Jeff Bezos has decided to make the transition.
Well, it's really a hard thing to do. I mean, especially when you've built the company. I mean, one thing, I was 9 to 10 years as CEO, and I grew up in IBM. I love IBM, obviously, but it wasn't mine. It wasn't my creation. It was the Watson family. And so if you're the founder like Jeff, I can imagine it's a very, very difficult decision to make. However, at the same time, he's really not leaving the company because he's still executive chairman. So he still has a role.
But at the same time, his role at the company is going to be different. The company is different at this point as well. It's not at this meteoric rise that it's had. It's now getting besieged by the government. Yeah,
well, that's exactly. It's quite interesting, as you know, and the same things happen to other companies we've talked about: Microsoft, IBM, AT&T, and I look back on it. It comes with success. I mean, when you're that successful and you get that large, people are going to come after you, and usually it's your competition, quite honestly. But then they lobby the various government entities, and then politics takes over, and then you find yourself in these difficult situations. In my experience, the founders have a very hard time with that. They can't understand how that could happen. I'm not saying that's the case for Jeff, but my experience with both talking with Bill Gates and spending a lot of time, because I used to support Mr. Watson Jr. As when I was executive assistant to the chairman and the CEO of IBM. And I had firsthand conversations with him. So you could see as a founder why that was a very hard thing for him to psychologically cope with.
Well, I mean, you ran a big company that was under siege from the government. Is it possible, not just for psychological reasons, not as much fun to defend, but also for the sake of the company, is it better to have somebody a little more detached, where it's not literally their child?
I think that's the way to think about it. I mean, basically, what happened in IBM's example, and I spent a time with Tom Watson, and then it was Frank Carey, who became chairman, and then John Opel, who became CEO. But Mr. Watson made a decision, and he was still the founder and the majority shareholder, but made a decision that Carey would become chairman and work with the government and try to resolve the suit, and John would run the company. So there really was kind of a division of responsibilities. I think that's really, really important because it's really hard not to get distracted. If you look what happens long-term over these suits, IBM, we missed a thing called client server. Microsoft obviously did extremely well there. Microsoft missed the internet, and I think it's distraction. I really think a lot of that is because when you are the CEO and you're also dealing with the government suit, between the legal pressures and the advice you're getting from counsel on how you should proceed, how you should set strategy, the company gets distracted for a period of time. In our case, that was almost 10 years. In Microsoft's case, I think it was more than 10, maybe 12, AT&T. That happens. And then as a result of that, you miss these big technological shifts.
One of the things that no one's been distracted from is the cloud, the dramatic rise in the cloud, including at Amazon, not limited to Amazon. It's probably no coincidence that the person succeeding Jeff Bezos really was running the cloud operation at Amazon. What do you make of that change in technology overall, that huge move into the cloud?
Well, it's interesting because if you think about where Amazon began, they were selling, tapes and books on the internet, basically. Right now, they're the largest provider of cloud services through AWS, which, as you know, Andy was running at Amazon. Now, having said all that, it's a huge transition of the infrastructure. I think a thing you might find of interest, Dave, is that if you look at the most recent CEO appointments over the past couple of years, they all have cloud experience. Amazon, Google, Microsoft, IBM, right? So that indicates that the leadership of those companies have concluded that the skill set required for the future is someone who understands those technologies that are going to transition those companies and those business models into this cloud era, and put on top of that artificial intelligence. It's a compounding of both of those things, but all those people have those backgrounds. So I think it's an interesting pattern emerging here when it comes to leadership of these tech companies.